Collabs are fun.
Collabs are fun.
Collabs are fun.
Fun.
We had fun.
We like fun.
F is for friends who do things together. U is for you and me. N is for anyone and anytime at all down here in the deep blue sea.
For once, James has nothing to contribute, so he doesn't say anything.
See, I haven't even seen SpongeBob, but I know the FUN song.
Oh, okay.
F is for flames burning down the whole town. U is for uranium bombs. N is for no survivors.
Is that
No,
Plankton?
Plankton. That's not what having fun is all about.
I guess if you audibly turn your attention to the file name of last week's episodes.
This is the story of a toy who cried a river and drowned a whole boy.jpg.
Yeah.
This is
The story of a boy.
This is the story of a toy.
We cried a river and drowned a whole boy. I love being able to name my own files sometimes. I try to keep it less weird for work purposes, but this man may or may not have a folder full of 137 memes that he pulled out of his the last year's worth of memes at work in a folder with a deceptive title.
Like homework?
Yeah, something like that.
Something like the homework
Something
folder?
like that. It's funny because I pulled that stunt growing up too. Like I in my homework folders where I'd stick my goofing off files. Not like anybody was gonna look, to be completely honest. But that's where I kept all this stuff that I would do, like Photoshop edits and audio recordings for goofy stuff and whatever. It was sort of like creating your own digital room that you can mess around in. Sort of that equivalent. Back in the old days with Windows XP and File Explorer. The Windows XP.
Yeah, back in my day, the monitor was deeper than it was wide.
Yeah. And they were pretty dang heavy.
Oh boy.
Like these flat screens are
Of course,
not all that much.
a lot. It takes a lot to run a CRT, just like the space.
The vacuum tubes.
Indeed.
Cathode rays. I think that's what CRT.
Well, cathode ray tube, yeah.
Yeah.
That is what that stands for.
Yup.
Because there's a cathode, and they shoot rays through it.
Those are the guys who killed my boy Steve Irwin.
Oh man.
He got too close to a cathode ray tubes. Get out of the TV, Steve Irwin. It's going to cost your life. Oh, wait.
We're backwards.
Uh-oh.
You're backwards.
Backwards. That's okay.
Don't pause it. Let them hear
This is
glorious
Good
sound
content.
of him turning the microphone around. Scrape, scrape.
Scrape, scrape,
Scrape,
scrape,
scrape,
scrape, scrape.
Scrape.
You coming
The
through now,
mic
bud?
stand is kind of coming over my shoulder here in this
Configuration.
flavor of the week
Yeah.
room setup.
One of these days, we'll have the ideal setup, but that is not this day.
It is not this day.
I don't even know what
When one of you buys a house,
Yes, pretty much.
that's when we're.
This
gonna
is the
have it.
podcast room.
So in that case, the ideal setup is we're all either remote or there's one large office that we all
Inhabit.
Like, the ideal thing would be to have like a round table
Yes.
with like so we could stare at each other over our microphones.
And a nice long cable to connect the equipment to the computer so it doesn't have to be immediately next to the computer. Or something. Or like a nice laptop. Dreams and goals for the future.
Someday when money is had.
Yes. Someday when we can has more than a substantially larger 2 listeners.
Mm-hmm.
So don't start binge eating John and Faith. That's not what we're talking about. We're, like, we're talking quantitative, not qualitative increase.
Uh-huh. You doing okay?
No.
Figures.
Like, this is my brain fog coming off of editing last week's episode, which, I mean, we're sorting it out because of timey-wimey, wibbly-wobbly editing world stuff. Future James of the past was working on the last episode.
Days of Future Past, James?
Doing some troubleshooting and kind of wrecked my brains a little bit. But it's all okay now, I think. I mean, people who listened to last week's episode already before listening to this one will know the answer to that question, but nevertheless. That's enough about me. What about you guys? I mean, we all saw each other yesterday as of recording this.
Indeed we did.
Indeed.
And we'll have to...
See, I feel like when we're all together, we should dispense with the "How's your week" bit.
How's your week?
Yeah.
And, just shoot the breeze and do stupid, funny bits.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't
Here's
entirely mind disposing with it altogether all the
here's-
time.
Yeah.
Here's the problem with the breeze. It's a moving target. It's
Well,
difficult to shoot.
Right.
I mean, you
It's-
gotta lead a little bit.
It's a massive moving gas, right? So I guess anytime
Actually,
you fling a
it's extremely
projectile...
easy to hit the breeze.
Yeah.
Because
guess it
it's sort of
is.
omnipresent.
Yeah. So if you throw any sort of projectile or object through the wind, you are shooting the breeze.
Now, if you have like one of those air cannons that like shoot just a puff of air, that is literally shooting a breeze.
Yeah, a very small one at that, but
it's
nevertheless.
A
I suppose
force of
fans shoot the breeze,
Indeed.
or they
They do.
redirect.
No, they shoot the breeze.
Because-
they redirect air into a breeze.
Yeah,
The air which was not hitherto a breeze.
yeah. Or is a breeze a purely meteorological phenomenon?
That might be the case.
It might be. In which case, there aren't many people who can fire their own breeze. Now that's a new idiom for farting.
Yeah,
I'm about to fire up a breeze here.
it's like some superhero, like quaint, quirky superhero and a spoof or whatever. I feel like that's probably been done.
Breeze
It's like-
shooter?
Yeah,
It's like
breeze shooter.
breeze shooter. Oh, sorry, we weren't supposed to do that anymore.
Oh right, sorry.
Sorry.
Well, it's
Sorry,
one or the other.
Faith.
One of the
Sorry.
what's either one thing or the other. We have limited anime episodes, or we do the thing. You got to pick.
One request at a time, and make sure they come through the email, please.
At palladiumpapist@gmail.com. And we let's see. I feel like we haven't had any requests recently.
No, we haven't. I would really like to do another one, honestly.
I
Yeah.
think it would be just really interesting to, have something that we potentially haven't seen or haven't decided we wanted to think about in an analytical way,
Yeah.
and then be forced to do it because we like our audience.
It's a
We
good
like pleasing
challenge. Like the last time we did it was a nice challenge.
them. It was one of the more interesting discussions we've had.
Yes, I agree.
So I think our quality of episodes would go up if we got more requests.
Mm-hmm. If you want, so our resident quality assurance team, volunteer quality assurance team of the Volunteer Quality Assurance Podcast.
Is that what John was joking around with us yesterday that he's going to make a new podcast?
A John cast?
A
John
cast.
cast.
And it's going to be called The John Show, and he's just going to say John.
Like
John,
he's some kind of Pokemon or
John.
something.
I dig it.
John.
I dig it. Well, it's like there's this YouTube channel where this guy makes songs where he just says a name over and over again, and he just goes down the list. So if you have a fairly common English name, you're probably on the YouTube channel. And he does like special arrangements for everything. So it could be like the podcast version of that, where except for it's
Just
only-
bust out a book of baby names. You've got several years worth of content there.
He's got a good reading voice. Like he could probably do a dramatic reading of Best Baby Names A to Z from 1994.
Alexander.
Yeah.
And now we
Joaquin.
come to the girls' names.
Take that, audiobook industry. People just
Just
reading the
baby
dictionary.
names. There's a market for that.
There
for,
is.
For like reading baby names. Imagine if you're just a young couple that's like can't decide.
You know,
just like
how would that sound out loud? How do you pronounce this name? like John gets it wrong, and now there's just a generation of children with a mispronounced Joaquin instead of Joaquin or something. I legit thought that's how you pronounce Joaquin when I was growing up, by the way, because I had no frame of reference. I was just like, okay, sound it out. James, you're 9 years old. You can read.
This probably operates according to English diction.
Yes.
Because I'm 7 and I don't know anything outside that frame of reference.
Yep.
If you were named Joaquin.
Yeah.
And
then I would know.
Then you would know, but you're not named that. Wames.
Yeah.
Juanes.
Juanes.
More like James.
Yeah. I was
like it's good with chips.
I was I was nearly named Jacques, but I'm glad I was named James because figuring out how to spell Jacques,
You just go by Jack.
yeah, pretty much. But yeah, well, because some versions of it is just Ques and others is like CQUES.
And then somebody's gonna name it just write it out JOCK.
Yeah, I have a hard enough time telling people how to spell my last name, like when I'm filling out
Yeah,
applications.
and there's a capital there.
Yep. No space. Why did you put a space? Whatever. It's fine. It's fine.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always like impressed when somebody gets it right the first try. Like, wow, good job.
You understand French.
Yes. With your name, Nathan, I suppose it's a lot more. It makes more phonetic sense.
I suppose, but then when you're over the phone, or sometimes people will be
Yeah.
like, so that was an F? No, it is not Lafart, thank you very much. That is the oldest insult joke in the book. My great-grandfathers had to deal with that.
Yes.
No, it is an S as in Sam. So, Nathan Sam? No!
Wait, you mean like Samus? Well, we might be able to. No, that's not how you say my name. Say my name.
Say what again?
I dare you. That was the other thing we were talking about yesterday. Riley wants to see Pulp Fiction, and I feel like that's like a good Friday or Saturday night, and I have no idea what else to watch, but I have some whiskey and I have no plans.
Yep.
Kind of a movie.
I am aware that it's a cult classic sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that being a cult classic was kind of the point.
Is cult classic just code for didn't do well in the box office, but is entertaining enough for a lot of people to like it?
It just means a very select group of people like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, sure, maybe it didn't do well at the box
office.
The box office initially,
Uh-huh.
but like it has grown a following of people that just really like it.
Yeah.
Does that mean it deserves that people like it?
I would say
Sure.
that Fantastic Mr. Fox would be considered a cult.
Yeah, I've heard it referred to as such, and like Shaun of the Dead and some other films like that.
Just more niche films that like didn't go huge mainstream
Right.
or anything like that.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. Well, speaking of cults, we're the Palladian Papists. I'm James.
Nathan.
And I'm Riley.
Today we have an edition of Filmosophical.
In a world where one man will decide whether to pull a lever and kill one man, or not pull a lever and allow 5 people to die, find out in Filmosophical.
So yes, Filmosophical. It's the part of the show where we get philosophical about films.
The part of the show. That's the whole show.
Well, yes. So this week we're talking about the, I believe, 1994 film, The Shawshank Redemption.
Otherwise known as the Shankshonk
Redonk.
Herefore after referred to as the Shankshonk
Redonk. Shankshonk prison.
So yes, I believe
the movie takes place in
in
the early 1940s.
yes,
Narrated, but not really narrated by Morgan Freeman.
Both
semi-narrated.
narrated and starring Morgan Freeman.
Morgan Freeman. Anyway, yes. So in the late 40s-ish, this man, I just watched a movie. What is his name?
Andy Dufresne.
Andy Dufresne has been sent to prison for killing his wife and
Allegedly.
killing his wife and her lover that she was having an affair with, this golf pro fella. There was some evidence that implicated him, and
he was there with a gun on the scene. But according to his testimony, he was drunk, sobered up, and decided against it and drove away threw his gun in the river,
which the police never found, which is
awfully convenient, isn't it, Mr. Dufresne?
From my perspective, it's awfully inconvenient.
From my perspective, the Jedi are evil.
So anyway, he gets sent off to Shawshank Prison.
You worked hard to not say Shankshonk.
We've made it stuck in John's mind that it's called Shankshonk or Donkshonk, and he has a hard time saying anything else.
He thought that this was pulp, like he had this in Pulp Fiction and stuff. Anyway, we're just airing all of John's dirty laundry.
John is our beloved guest. We are able to air his dirty laundry. Friend of the podcast.
Yes. Anyhow, so Andy Dufresne gets sent to Shawshank Prison, where he meets Morgan Freeman's character, Red, and a host of other characters. You got the warden, who's kind of a tight-fisted, hand to the grindstone, Mr. Scrooge. Wait,
hands to the grindstone?
Anyway. Well, that's how Dickens phrased it. Anyway, I think. So, yeah, this guy is I believe in two things, the Bible and discipline. I think it's something along those lines.
Discipline and the Bible.
So at first, Andy is having a hard time because he's getting kind of abused by some of his fellow inmates. He's pretty quiet. He keeps to himself. But over time, he begins to ingratiate himself with his fellow inmates.
And even some of the officers.
Officers, because it turns out that he was, before he got put into prison, he was a banker and pretty savvy financially. So he starts helping out the guards with their taxes, and by doing a favor for one of the head guards, was able to secure beer for his group of new buddies, including Red. Who is a man who's known for getting a hold of things from time to time. So he smuggles things into the prison for Andy and other people for the price of a couple bucks or some cigarettes or what have you.
And Andy's a bit of a geology enthusiast. He likes rocks.
He's like, I want to carve a chess set. So could you get a rock hammer smuggled in for me?
Now, you don't mean to kill anybody with this rock set.
Yep.
It's like, no, it's the tiniest little hammer you could ever possibly...
yeah, there's no way I'd be able to escape from here in that thing either. It's too small. It's like, yeah, it'd take a man 600 years to escape from this prison with a tool that small. And so he has his little hobbies, and he gets things smuggled to him every once in a while. He makes a chess set, and...
He gets some very large pinups of the
different
most famous actresses of the time.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, Rita Hayworth.
Yeah. And he, over time, his talents are noticed by the warden because at this point he's doing all the tax returns for the whole prison guard staff.
Mm-hmm.
And around tax season, his buddy Red helps them as a clerk. So, over time... another deal with Red is he's serving a life sentence, and every few years he gets called up for a parole review. Every 10 years he gets called up for a parole review, and they're like, "Do you think you've been rehabilitated?" And he's like,
"Oh yes, sir. Absolutely, sir." Gives the exact same speech.
No changes to society here.
Yeah.
The exact same canned speech every time, and
gets rejected every single time. Red and Andy are becoming, pretty good friends, and
they've got each other's backs in the prison.
Mm-hmm. Because he's ingratiated himself with the guards by helping them out. They take care of a couple of the prisoners that have been giving him grief in, rather unethical and
very prison ways.
So life is getting better for Andy in prison. The years go by, and Andy, because of his financial prowess, is helping his fellow prisoners by constantly sending letters to the state legislature asking for funds so he can build a library. And so through a lot of pestering, he's finally able to secure like a really nice library collection of books, and helps some of his fellow inmates like earn their high school equivalency certificates and things like that, making life better for his fellow inmates. And
another significant small plot point that is happening sort of before this is one of the elderly prisoners, Brooks, is
he's the current librarian.
He's the current librarian before Andy is called in to help out with it. And he is due to be released soon. And so he's not taking that well because he spent virtually his entire adult life,
like 50 years, was it?
Over 50 years.
Yeah.
In prison.
It's literally the only world he knows at this point. It's what he's used to.
Because he went into prison in like 1900, 1905, something like that, and he comes out of prison in the 50s, and the world is completely different. So he's in a halfway house as he's figuring out the rest of his life, but he just becomes depressed and takes his own life. Because he's become institutionalized. He's reliant upon the system because that's just kind of ingrained into him, and that sort of gives pause to the other men in there serving their life sentences. Like, gee, this is kind of a scary thought, being reliant upon this place I kind of hate, but have grown to be comfortable in. So that's going on. And after becoming the new librarian and whatnot, Andy is also being enlisted by the warden to kind of handle his dirty money and money laundering.
Because the warden has started a new program to get the inmates working, doing jobs for the state and stuff. Building roads and stuff like that. But there are other contractors that work with the state that are like, you're undercutting us with your slave labor, essentially, being the cheapest price. I'll pay you off to get this job so I can make dinner for my family in 2 weeks. And so the warden has just a whole bunch of dirty money coming through, and he has Andy set up this really kind of great laundering scheme where he set up another account. He willed a whole other person into existence that doesn't exist except on paper,
with a social security number, bank accounts, etc., etc.
All
the whole works.
Whole 9 yards.
So if nothing can be traced back to him or to the warden. As time goes by and he's doing these things, it gets to the point where it's about 19 years he's been in prison.
Which is just shy of when we met Morgan Freeman. He'd been in there for 20 years. With Red is Morgan Freeman's character, but
yeah. And there's this. It's about the 60s, and there's this new fella who gets sent to prison, kind of younger. He quickly befriends Andy and Red and their crew, and it comes up as Andy is helping him get his high school equivalency exam that. He's like, so what were you in for again? Wait, you're in prison for murdering a golf pro and his lover? I met a guy in prison who basically confessed to doing that as a boast. And so Andy's like, are you serious? This is the proof I need to get another trial and I can get out of here? Because everybody in Shawshank is innocent.
Except for Red.
And he's the one guilty man in all of Shawshank.
Well, one of two.
And now Tommy is also admitting that he's guilty.
The new guy, Tommy. But Andy's actually innocent. So he brings this to the warden, who's like, nope, you can't leave.
You can't leave. I need you.
And it's like, if it's about the money laundering, I can't. I won't tell anybody.
He's like, how dare you even bring that up? You're going to go into solitary confinement.
For a month. Which is an exceptionally long time.
Yeah. And then another month on top of that because he's being extra mean.
Well, that's after he kills Tommy. Framing it as an escape attempt.
He's like, are you prepared to swear on the Bible in a court of law that this is the truth? Yes, sir, I am. And then he orders one of his guards to kill him.
I knew you'd say that.
He basically lures him outside the walls of the prison and makes it look as if it's an escape. And so, yeah, it's at this point where Andy's like, okay,
I've had enough.
I've had enough of this. So he's like, time to get busy living or get busy dying.
So he asks one friend to smuggle in 6 feet of rope, and he goes to his cell for the night.
Well, he tells Red, like, okay, so there's this tree in a field in this part of New England. I want you, Red, if you ever get out, to go find this rock that looks like it has no business being there, and I have a gift for you under there. I want you to have it. So he does that, and then he gets the rope, and he goes to his jail cell, and all of his buddies are like, dang, he's
really doing it.
He's really doing it. You know, he's gonna off himself. And so morning comes, and Andy doesn't show from his cell. And the guards are, doing the morning inspection or whatever. Like, you better be sick or dead in there, or you're gonna get it.
But he just wasn't.
He wasn't there. He was there when they went to bed at night, and he wasn't there when they got up in the morning. And they discover behind one of his pinup girl posters is this hole in the wall. It turns out that Andy had
a little rock hammer worn down to just the barest nub.
Mm-hmm. Andy really had tunneled through the entire wall because it was kind of crappy concrete that it was made out of over the years.
It was
and
good
covered,
when it was laid, but time and pressure,
Yeah, because he's a geologist, it's a study of time and pressure. He had time and the pressure he wanted to get out.
Mm-hmm.
So he managed to swipe the warden's shoes and his suit, smuggle those into his room.
Managed to trade out the
papers
that prove that there has been
money laundering and crimes. And
he assumes the fake identity he created, withdraws a metric ton of just money out of the
$370,000, which is a large amount of money in the early 70s.
In the 60s and 70s.
Yeah, and so he
gives the bank the files that prove the fraud.
Well, he gives it to the press.
He puts it in the mail.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
He and then it gets discovered, and then there's a whole scandal, and then the warden takes his life rather than facing the consequences of his actions, and then one of the head guards also gets arrested for murder because he murdered several of the inmates over the course of time. So these two guys get their just desserts, and Andy is a free man. He's a new person now.
He crosses the border into Mexico
because he told Red, I'm gonna start a little resort off of the. I want you to remember the name. I don't, but on the Pacific Ocean, I'm gonna fix up an old boat and do a charter service and have a hotel. I want you to come and join me when you get out. So years later, Red does indeed. He gives a different speech this time when he has his parole hearing. I believe
he's kind of had enough and tells them the honest truth. He's like, I'm not. I've become something totally different in here. I wouldn't fit in society.
Mm-hmm. It's like if I could go back and talk to myself when I was first put into prison as just a young, stupid kid, I would have told him, don't.
This is how it's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
Don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's what earns him freedom. That's what proves he has truly been rehabilitated.
Yeah. Well, and then Red at this point is has over the years been grappling with, am I going to become institutionalized like Brooks was?
And he gets put in the same halfway house room Brooks was in, has the exact same job.
Bagging groceries
that Brooks had. He sees himself trending toward where Brooks trended.
Mm-hmm.
But he remembers the promise he made to Andy. He goes and finds what was under the rock pile, and it's a letter saying, "Congratulations! Hey, come join me. Remember?
Mm-hmm. Here's some money.
Here's some money to get there." And so he does.
And he and Andy, are their buds there now on their resort, going to start the little charter service in Mexico and live happily ever after, both having attained their Shankshonk Redonk their Shawshank, the redemption.
Well, Andy.
The Redinkadink. So that's
Andy, this truly has been a Shankshonk redemption.
And that's the end of the movie. Get busy living or get busy dying.
The real Shawshank Redemption was
the friends we made along the
way. And you know what? That's kind of actually...
That is kind of the point, yeah.
It is true.
So what do we like about Shawshank Redemption?
Where to even start? There's just too much.
It is. Everyone you talk to about this movie is like, oh, that's a classic.
It's a really well-made
It's
film.
earned that reputation.
And even for like some of the dark and gross subject matter that it has in it, it is very tasteful about presenting it. It's never like
It's never explicit.
Right.
It
always
doesn't shy
implied
away from telling you that it's going on, but it also doesn't make
it has the
graphic.
modesty to just let it be implied.
And even though all these guys are convicted felons, you end up feeling sympathetic for these people in their situation.
Well,
but it doesn't like make you like think, oh yeah, these guys don't deserve to be here. You know, like
it treats them with humanity.
Yeah.
But also that they were people that make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
They were dumb kids once that made mistakes and had to
live with them for the rest of their lives in most
and
cases.
that one mistake dictates the entire rest of their life, essentially.
Yeah.
I would say like the number one thing about this movie that's so incredible is just the hopeful attitude that it has.
Yeah.
Because
hope is one of the themes that kind of goes back and forth. Like Andy and Red have different attitudes. Red, he's been in prison longer than Andy, and he's like, yeah, hope is a dangerous thing. You gotta...
It'll drive you insane.
Yeah, you gotta let go of it.
You can't hold on to it in here.
But Andy's perspective is that hope is the one thing keeping him sane and from becoming institutionalized.
Yeah.
Right? And that's one of the things he offers to the rest of the inmates through the library and the Hank Williams record collection and just having all this stuff.
And playing this Italian opera over the loudspeaker for the entire prison to hear.
And much to the warden's distaste.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So he's very much a hopeful force in the prison.
And he really shapes the attitudes of all of his friends by being a hopeful person. Because everyone else in the prison has resigned themselves to being there for their entire life.
Mm-hmm.
But he's really changing that.
But Andy treats everyone with human respect, with a human dignity, right? It's like even after the incident that got him put in jail, Andy has given up drinking altogether. But when he exchanges a case of beer for doing the guards, figuring out the guards' financial issues, it's just to give the inmates a taste of
what it's like
humanity.
to be a free man, because you can't have beer when you're in the prison,
Right.
He said, and they're like, for a minute there, we felt like free men, because they were doing a job where they were tarring a roof or something in this building outside the prison, and they were drinking a beer,
Working outdoors, drinking a beer. It's like they're almost human.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
It's like they're almost men.
Yeah. So yeah, this movie does a really good job of humanizing its characters. Yeah. Any other points along those lines?
I think it's very... The warden's character is one of the really big archetypal characters that it attacks. The warden's obviously a very hypocritical man.
Yeah.
Oh, obviously.
Like, he's very ostensibly interested in the Bible because he hands one out to every inmate as they come in, and he knows, verse, chapter, number, all that.
And he has this little needle point of a Bible verse or something on it on his wall,
He's got
which
a cross stitch or something.
which hides behind it a safe where he keeps his dirty money.
Well, that's
and
not
what
symbolism.
it says on it is judgment cometh and right soon, and that right soon. I mean, it's probably the King James translation, but
yeah,
judgment is coming and that soon. That's the idea. And that piece of irony is presented, the entire film as being the thing that hides his, personal failings and corruption.
He hides his cruelty and corruption under a veil of Bible verses.
And
He doesn't take the faith any deeper than a surface level.
yeah, and all of those things, Andy in the end manages to triumph and turn everything on its head against him, because he hid this little rock pick
inside of his Bible.
And
salvation lies within.
Yep. And I think at one point, Andy and the warden are throwing Bible verses back and forth.
And it earns respect with the warden. It's like, your good book. I will have you work and launder my money.
I suppose you could say it's like presents two different looks at, justice, like punitive justice versus I'm trying to think. Punitive justice versus rehabilitative. That's not the right pronunciation, but you know what I'm saying. Like
punishment versus rehabilitation and healing.
Yeah,
it's justice oriented toward the ultimate good of its recipient, rather than punishing them for punishment's sake.
Which is the latter being the warden's sort of perspective,
right?
And that of the guards and the other inmates, and it goes all the way down the line.
Until Andy shows up and starts changing people's minds a little bit.
And in a sort of symbolic final act, Andy escapes by breaking into a sewer pipe and crawling through 500 yards of sewage to freedom in the rain outside. There's like the iconic moment where he's standing in the rain, with his arms held high, in the very triumph of the human spirit moment.
Yeah, basically he had to
crawl
through the worst of humanity to get to freedom.
Yeah, it sort of symbolizes like the whole
movie.
The whole movie, like those 19 years, 20 years he spent in prison unjustly to get his own sort of redemption. And like, any wrongs I've done, I've paid for many times over at this point.
Even though he never committed the wrong he's in prison for.
He's still sorry that he was, not a great husband to his wife, and that drove her away to the point where she got into an affair and, tragically was murdered, because she was in that situation.
Funny, one of my favorite lines is like, I had to go to jail to become a criminal when he was embezzling funds and laundering money and stuff.
Yep. And then Red's character also has kind of a redemption.
A redemption?
Well. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, right. Yeah. Well, he's not dead though.
No, but he's Shawshank.
Yeah, that's true. It never really says what Red's crime was.
No, but it's assumed to be murder.
Like murder or something along those lines.
I believe he did say he did murder. I don't know that he said who, but
or why, or how, or when.
He's like, "Yep, I did it." Like he's come full to terms, like with his mistakes.
And he's the only person in the prison
who isn't, denying that they
did whatever they're alleged to have done.
Yeah. So, and at the end, with Andy's help and friendship, he's able to also find that little bit of redemption and live out the rest of his days a free man and not becoming institutionalized.
Morgan Freeman.
And
that was the day he went from Morgan prisoner to Morgan Freeman.
Before Brooks ended his life, he carved into his halfway house room on the wall. Brooks was here. And, in a mirroring act of that, Red writes next to it, and so was Red.
Well, it copies the scene, like, shot for shot.
Where he climbs up on the table, pulls out the pocket knife, and carves it. Except one ends with walking away. The other scene ended with...
Well, one, he chooses to live.
Right.
Better get busy living or get busy dying.
Yep.
That's another one of the really big themes of the movie. It's like when you choose to let go of hope, you are essentially submitting yourself to death. And everything you're doing is, whether you like it or not, oriented toward death. Nothing is fruitful. Nothing is good without hope. So you either have the choice to take your life into your own hands and make something of it, or just waste away doing whatever for
Either
until you
take
die.
your life into your own hands or take your life.
Yeah. And because when these men are placed in prison, they're the rest of their lives is sort of outside their control. So how they cope with that really
Is by just giving up control.
Yeah. And, Red says once he's released, like, he can't do anything without permission from his superiors. Like,
just because
he's just been trained to do that for the last 40 years.
And
he doesn't know anything different.
yeah, and like over time, like he's been struggling. Like I'm going to turn into Brooks. I'm going to be institutionalized. I've been in prison so long, I don't really have any skills that make me a useful person in the outside world. But Andy manages to show him, that's not true. Like, you have value. I could use a man that is good at getting things from time to time, in this new life I'm going to be building. And so through his friendship manages to kind of reveal to Red that his life still has value. And it's not just what he's worth to society, but who he is as a person that makes, his life worth living outside of prison. Because he was like considering doing things that would like break his parole, like getting a gun or something, so he could go back to prison and back to his comfortable life. But ultimately he chooses to, follow up on Andy's gift to him. So, yeah.
And that gift was a Shawshank Redemption.
Yeah. I suppose with that, we can go into our transcendental analysis of the film. Truth. What is true in the Shawshank Redemption?
You need hope to make life make sense and to not be totally awful.
Yeah.
It is an essential virtue. It's why it's one of the 3 most important virtues that we have.
You can't adopt
Along with
this
faith and
fatalist,
charity.
right? You can't adopt this sort of fatalistic view of your life where nothing is really in your control. Where you just kind of lays about day to day.
Submit to death. That's
because even if you're not in prison, you can sort of imprison yourself by bad habits and different things that drive you down the path to death, as it were, through bad choices. Because you don't accept, the gift of hope, you can go down a dark path, and many people do, which leads a lot of people to prison.
or worse.
Or worse,
Indeed.
yeah. I suppose that, that's like sort of the central theme of the movie. Whereas, if you do live in hope, even if injustice is done to you, if you live in hope, you can rise above all sorts of evil.
And also, being an example of that hope can inspire others to overcome their submission to death and start to hope again themselves.
It's a contagious thing. Don't make me hope. Different
Don't
movie.
do that.
Don't give me hope.
Yeah, different movie, but yeah. Any other? The wages of sin is death. I
The wages
suppose
of sin is death.
that's what it boils
The
down to.
judgment cometh, and that right soon.
Salvation
Also,
lies within.
What you sow, you shall reap.
human beings have value and deserve to be treated by human beings, even if they've done some terrible things. It's like you've got value.
Yeah.
These people in Shawshank were reduced to a number and an arm to do a job, or an object to be used by other inmates.
And that's sort of demonstrated right off the bat, where one of the inmates that arrive at prison with Andy is, he sort of has a mental breakdown. He's afraid
He's
to be in
taunted
prison.
into a mental breakdown by his fellow inmates.
To which
and then
he's
is
beaten
to death by the guards. It's like, oh, that's the kind of place Shawshank is. It's this place of death and punishment.
Yeah. Let's see. Goodness. What is good in the Shawshank Redemption?
Andy is good.
Andy
Yes.
is indeed good.
Yeah.
Andy is like the sole source of goodness in
He's
this
the
film.
light that shines in
he
the
is
darkness.
The source.
The
of
source.
Good, but he does engender good in many of his friends who didn't start out so good.
He's a channel
In
of
fact, one of the people in his group was the guy who egged on Fatso to, have a mental breakdown and get beaten to death. He was responsible for that. So,
Yeah.
but as the movie progresses, Andy rubs off on him, and they start to form a really genuine friendship, and he starts to change. So, yes. Andy, especially Andy's relationship with Red, I think is one of the great points of goodness that will make you tear up a few times. Just towards the end of the movie, for sure.
And also his relationship with the young kid who came in the 60s.
Yeah,
Tommy.
Yeah, who didn't believe in himself, but Andy...
he gave him... He taught him, tutored him so he could take his high school equivalencies. He got super frustrated with the test and threw it out, but Andy mailed it in anyway, and he passed.
C+ average, so he almost didn't pass.
He almost didn't pass, but he did pass. And that's directly before he passed away.
Yeah,
So-
and the tragedy with Tommy was that he had
He had a wife and a daughter on the way.
and he was only a few months out from finishing his
He was
sentence.
a year.
Yeah, he was only a year out from finishing his sentence and going back out, and even helping Andy get out. And he's sort of amending his ways. By
he
Andy's
had
example.
a life ahead of him that was cut short by the warden. Yeah.
So, beauty. What is beautiful about Shawshank Redemption?
Well, it's in a prison. That is not a beautiful location.
However,
the filmmaking, like the techniques behind it, it was just really well put together. It's a 2.5 hour movie, but it didn't feel 2.5 hours. It was really...
there was no really dead weight to the
it
movie.
was paced very, very well.
It didn't move especially fast by any means.
No,
But then at the same time, like when you get to about the second act, like, or the third act, and whoa, Andy's been here for 19 years. Like it's sort of...
it creeps up on you.
Yeah, it creeps up on you just like if you're in prison and you're used to life, like, dang, those years flew right by. So it sort of communicates that through the storytelling, the filmmaking.
So it's a leisurely paced film, but it never drags.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it's leisurely paced. I would say it's paced according to prison life.
Yeah.
It's meant to feel how it feels.
Like
The first night is the longest. In the first few years, they feel like years, and then the longer you're in there, the faster it seems to go.
So the pacing picks up as the movie goes along to reflect that. Yeah. And then the writing of the movie, I think, is obviously like the biggest pro for it. Like there's so many thematic elements that are just intricately woven together, and the narrations given by Red and different things like this sort of highlighting.
Oh, it's Morgan Freeman's voice. Of course, his narrations are going to be beautiful.
Yeah. But like all the key points of the movie are laid out fairly, out in the open, but at no point do you feel like, this
You're
is like
being
too on the
preached
nose
to
or
or
anything.
talked down to, right?
Yeah.
It's just showing you what the life is like. It's telling you as much as you need to know to understand what's going on, and but it doesn't strictly follow show don't tell, but it also tells from a very
Practical.
real human point of view.
And what's great about the reveal at the end is that you don't really see it coming. And it's not like a mystery movie where it's just like, well, I mean, it's sort of similar to that, but like you don't expect that. Like in a mystery movie, you're like, okay, when's this mystery going to be solved?
Right.
You're never thinking like, okay, when's Andy going to get out of prison? Because you just assume, he's got his life sentence now, he's stuck. But then that redemption comes, he screws over the warden. He uses his words against him. It turns out all that money laundering, he was just readying himself for the day when he gets out. He'd never given up hope. He wasn't going to end his life. He was going to find a new life on the outside. That crescendo at the end, at the climax of the movie, is
Andy's
very satisfying.
Andy as a character is kind of stoic and soft-spoken and kind of secretive. And that just doesn't say much. And that's one thing he attributes to the breakdown of his marriage. But it really, at the end, it's like, that makes sense. He wasn't,
Yeah.
wouldn't communicate that sort of thing to people. He's very private in that way. But
And like that personality also is sort of what lands him in trouble when he's in his trial, where everyone's like, "Oh man, this guy's really cold-blooded. He is not regretful one bit for what he did to his, you know."
Another thing, they mentioned, they talk like him and like Red and we were just saying his main character's name. I'm bad.
Oh, Andy.
Yeah, Red and Andy play checkers several times throughout the movie, and Andy's like, "Man, I'd love to play chess. I'd like to make a chess set." This guy's a chess player. This man has been playing the long game since he got that rock pick.
And he tells Red, like, you know, someday I'll teach you. And you know, at the end of the movie, it's like you sort of assume, like, yep, he's got all this, well, because he brought his chess set with him. And so he's like, yeah, he's going to teach Red chess now. So yeah, that was really cool. So yeah, just a wonderful tapestry of different storytelling.
Yeah, storytelling
coming together.
I also like there are several scenes that parallel each other,
Yeah,
but like distinctly take a different turn at the end.
yeah, to provide good contrast.
A good example is Red's monologue after he gets out of prison, and the way it like echoes the monologue earlier in the movie after the librarian got out of prison. And
yeah, because when the librarian got out of prison, he's like, it's reading off like a letter he wrote to his buddies back in prison,
and like shot for shot, him bagging groceries, him walking by the pawn shop,
him getting his room at the halfway house.
Right, the scenes paralleled each other like very very deliberately, and so like that's kind of part of a show don't tell, where it's showing that Red is in very much the same place as the old librarian was. And so just really well put together film.
Yes. The writing and the editing and the cinematography, the soundtrack and everything. Great stuff. There was not a lot of music in the film. No, but when it was there, it was impactful. Yeah. And I think it sort of reminds me, there's just like a lot of movies that came out during the 90s that have that similar feel. Like, you know, where they're a slower pace, but they tell like really genuine human story. And yeah, I think there's, like we said earlier, bringing it full circle, Shawshank Redemption really earns its reputation as one of the great classics.
Oh yeah,
of American cinema. So Unity, what brings us all together here?
Hope.
Yeah.
Hope brings it all together.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Hope drives the film. Hope pulls all of the threads together. It just all revolves around that.
The two themes are Shawshank and Redemption. But really though, you got the prison, you got the lack of hope, and then redemption, the hope for better.
The hope realized.
The hope realized. Exactly.
Yeah. So, good. Yeah. Can recommend. You know, there's elements of it that you probably want to have more mature.
It's an R-rated film, so
yeah,
there is
an R-rated audience.
There's a lot of coarse language. There is a lot of.
It's prison people.
It's prison.
Yeah,
and it's rough people and it's rough goings in prison. So watching the movie, bear that in mind.
Pretty mature viewing.
Not for kids.
Yeah, thematically speaking, the thematic material is quite mature, so nothing, terribly explicit. So, with that, thanks for listening to the Palladium Papists. You can listen to us on Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook at Pallapapists. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or complaints, or suggestions for future episodes, email us at palladiumpapists@gmail.com. And we'll talk to you guys next week. Bye.
Bye.
See ya.
Riley, actually see ya. Well, audibly see ya from back at seminary.
Audibly see ya from
back at seminary.
Yep.
Bye.
Mm-hmm.